Hi, Cédric. Nice to meet you. How are you today?
Hi, Federico. Nice to meet you too. I'm pretty good, honestly. Thank you.
I'm particularly happy about this interview because today we can speak about OBO, which is a company that is very successful in the modeling area. So my hope is that we can learn a lot from your experience and maybe take some inspiration, and someone else can also be as successful as you have been in this area. Maybe we can start explaining the meaning of the name of the company.
Well, yeah, OBO is a name picked by the three founders. It's a Latin word, and it means moving forward. And that's kind of the spirit we try to apply every day.
Nice. I think it's a nice name because it's inspiring and it's also short and it's memorable. So, good choice. If I remember correctly, the company was founded in November 2005 or beginning 2006, right?
Yes, that's right.
It has now quite an history. But can you tell us a bit about the history and the the first years of the company?
Sure. So the company was founded at the end of 2005 by three engineers, three developers actually, which had a different experience in previous companies, and they wanted to create their own to create new tools in order to accelerate development, software development. And so the company was founded by the end of the year, and I myself joined the company at the beginning of the next year as the first intern, while it was still only the three founders and in a small castle bakery.
Huh.
So we were all together, and I started my internship there. And well, now OBO is about 50 people and spread out in Nantes, Paris, Toulouse, and also in Vancouver.
Okay.
And I became the CEO of the company a few years ago.
And you were saying that one of the goal of the founders was to accelerate development, and about accelerating, it comes to mind Axeleo, that I think was one of your first product, and it was a code generator, right?
Yeah, that's right. At the time, lots of people were speaking about modeling driven techniques and MDA, and there was this idea of generating code from UML models and so on. And Axelio was the first product we released, and we released it as an open source product from the get-go. And Axelio is used to create your own code generator for your target language or target architecture from any kind of model as an input, being it UML or any DSL domain-specific language that you could use as input.
I think one of the reason of the success of the company was also the connection to very strong and important client. So I can think of Airbus, if I am correct, of Thales. And can you tell us about the big clients that you have been serving in these years?
Yeah, we have pretty big corporate clients. At the beginning, we decided to put Axelio open source for two reasons. First, in order to be known, because we're like only a few people in a small bakery and so on, and making it open source would make us exist. Also, in order to give some guarantees to these big corporations, Thales or Airbus or Pôle Emploi, which was one of the first customers we had also. And well, you are investing on your tools and you want it to last because it's a pretty big investment. And when you're speaking to a company which is not really known and which is like a few people's, well, you can't really make the decision to depend on that for your tools. Being open source is a key factor in convincing those kind of companies.
Yeah, also because for people who don't speak French, Pôle emploi is like the unemployment agency, so it's a
That's right.
public agency. So I think it's hard to convince them maybe to trust a small company, right?
Yeah, and a tool vendor in general. Such companies, they don't want to be dependent on it. So, of course, they are depending on IBM or some other in some way because they don't have really the choice. But here, when you're so small, it's not like you're IBM and you can just say, hey, buy your stuff and everything is going to be all right in 10, 20 or so on. When Airbus build tools, they need, in order to design an airplane, for instance, they need to be able to support it and to adapt the tool for 50 to 70 years. And obviously Airbus is not going to bet on a company being there for such a long time. So building open source technologies gives us this guarantee.
Yeah, it's difficult to think about these timescales because so many companies fail in a matter of a few years. When we think about OBO, it feels like a very established company, but it's like 14 years old. If we maybe they think in terms of 30, 50 years, it's a different mindset.
Yeah, especially in software, right?
One thing also that I was interested in discussing about the role of your position, because you have been founded in Nantes, right? And you have also strong connection with university in Rennes, so in the historical Brittany region, right? And so I was wondering if you think that it played a role to be based in that area and your relationship with Rennes and the universities in Rennes.
Yeah, it definitely played a role at the beginning in Nantes. So there was this research lab led by Jean Bézivin, which is a well-known researcher in the modeling area, especially at that time, as I would say he was one of the pioneers in France. The engineers, the founders, two of them were coming from a company which had very close tie with Jean Bézivin. The company is called Saudi France. And also me, I had the pleasure to have Jean Bézivin as a student and to have them giving me courses. And that's definitely all this influence which made me, when I got my degree, which made me look for an internship into modeling. So yeah, the beginning of the company is very close to this to the university and to these relationships. And then we did start the collaboration either on technologies like ATL, also as part of research projects from European research project or French research projects, in order to develop more innovation into the products and also to develop technologies as open source. Well, these collaborations have kind of grown, and we are pretty close now also to the lab in Rennes, to INRIA in Rennes, which share the same ideas, which works on the same thematics. And actually, I met with Benoit Commal, which now is in Rennes, but I met with him in while we were in Nantes. So it's all this area is very dynamic from a modeling point of view. It's also pretty dynamic from a software point of view, and it definitely played a very positive role, because my own story of having courses from a teacher about modeling, introducing me to modeling and so on. We also experience that with other students, right? Other students from the Nantes area, they would explore the modeling, engineering, and domain-specific language and so on. And so then at one point they need an internship, and we are here.
It seems very inspiring because I think it must not be easy to create this environment where there is a positive cycle in a way, because maybe someone start researching on a subject and this inspire a company, so difference, and then another one, so OBO can be started, and also so students have a place where to apply what they've studied. And I guess on the other ways is also help you to have the possibility of finding employees who knows about modeling, because I think to grow, now you're saying you're around 50 employees, it must be also not easy to find the right talent.
Exactly. So you need to reach some kind of critical point where you have, well, several researchers or labs working on the same areas and trying to maintain these connections and to use every opportunity you have to work together so that it's strong enough to start the machine. And of course, it only works if there's some kind of translation into the business world, right? If the company lives.
It's always challenging. Now, you were discussing in the beginning that you have now an office in Vancouver, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So now you are growing outside of Europe. And so I was curious about your impression between the differences between Europe and North America in general, if you think they are close or if they look at modeling or business in a different way.
Well, that's a pretty broad question. There's lots of differences. We opened the branch in Canada, and Stefan is leading the branch there. And Stefan is a former CEO of OBO, and he's now leading the branch in Canada. And we opened it at the point where it was pretty obvious that we needed to be there to find customers mostly around the MBSE area, everything around model-based system engineering and all the offer around Capella that we're providing. And we needed to be there to get in touch with the big industrial companies which are there in the space, defense, or automotive sector. Well, at this point, OBO was already quite known, or at least that's what we we figured. We were one of the few Eclipse strategic members around the world, and well, to us it was obvious. OBO was quite known even there. But when we arrived there, well, we discovered that it would take some work to be really known there, because they tend to use other software tools from other vendors. In North America, they tend to have a mindset where they have a need, they want the corresponding tool, and if the tool fits, then it's a deal. And if at some point they want to change the tool, they change the tool. And then in Europe, the mindset is really more focused on adapting tools. So always having a tools which is perfectly tailored for their use case. While in the North America, it's more focused on off-the-shelf tool. And is the tool meeting my requirement? Yes, no. It's in a way it's quicker because then you get the decision faster. But in France or in Europe, you can always tweak the tool and make sure it fits. So that's one difference, I would say, from a customer's point of view, which is pretty big, because OBO started with providing technology so that you can build your own tool. So it's very focused on customizing tools and adapting it on your need, which worked well in Europe. Then we moved to providing off-the-shelf tools, either on enterprise architecture business, on model-based system engineering. This can work in North America, but the whole build your own tool mindset is harder to grow there.
There is probably also a lot of maybe education is not the right word, but a lot of effort to build awareness about these possibilities.
Yeah, and the whole ideas behind modeling, which is like, well, you formalize stuff, you create your own language and so on. This, I think from a cultural perspective, it makes a lot of sense for Europeans, French, Germans, and so on. On the other side of the Atlantic, it's probably less part of the culture of creating your own formalism and so on. They're more looking for something which is already there and to use it.
Maybe we are more theoretical in our studies or in our mindset. And across the years, did you find that more people are getting familiar with modeling? It's becoming easier to adopt modeling solutions, or is stable?
Well, we at OBO try to make it easier, and we since the beginning actually was designed in a way which would make it easy to start with. Very fast turnaround. You would update your template and generate the code and go back to the model element and so on. And then we built Sirius with Thales at that point, and Sirius was all about empowering the user to create his own domain-specific modeler just in a few minutes, right? If you can define a graphical modeler in 10 or 20 minutes and have something which is already usable with very, very fast turnaround. So you just change the setting and you get the result instantly. Because we use the other technologies for our projects with Cleon, and we've seen that this long turnaround you will need by adapting the model, generating the code, and then adapting the code, because of course you had to customize stuff here and there, was really detrimental to getting to the point of having a good tooling. Because in order to get a good tooling, you have to test it with the users. Otherwise, it's not adapted. We've made a pretty good job in making it accessible, I think, with Sirius. And now with releasing Sirius Web, we are getting one step further, because now you can define your domain, your tool, and get instant deployment. So you don't even have to package something, distribute to the user, to wait for them to try it and to get result, to manage the versions in the meantime and so on. Now you can define your tool and instantly the user gets a result, gives you his feedback, you change the tool, and you get instant feedback and updated tool. So we focused on that, but that's the products we build ourselves. If you look at the other technologies, it's not as easy, I would say. That's kind of what we bring on the table ourselves. But it's been easier and easier over the years. If you look at all the UML modeling tools which were existing at the beginning of 2006, 2007, or 2008, they were pretty big tools with lots of pretty complex UI and so on. And it got better. Also, now that we're moving to the web, it's a good occasion to think again about what we want as a user experience. Because the biggest struggle with modeling tools is adoption. And what does it tell you? It tells you that most likely the user experience is pretty bad. So there's still lots of room for improvements, and I'm pretty excited about what's coming up with Sirius Web, because we're working with companies helping us in revising the user experience and thinking a bit outside of all this framework which has been put on us with the first UML tools. And it's going to be quite interesting to see how it evolves.
Basically, all the modeling and language workbench have some plan to move to the web. For some, it's very difficult. Like personally, I'm very interested in NPS, so there are some experiments to bring NPS to the web. And it seems very interesting to me also because I think that in many cases, when we design this tooling, they were based on some frameworks we were used as developers to build the tools themselves. Like in a way, everything that is based on Eclipse look a little bit like the Java IDE. And in NPS, it's also very true. You can create an editor and you have all the menus that are only useful to the language designer, not to the language user. So maybe if we move to the web, we can rethink a little bit the product.
Yeah, and all of this in order to get a better adoption of your tool. Really depends on the domain, but for many of our customers and users, they don't want to see an IDE. Some of them, they really want and need the features of an IDE. So with this technology, we try to cater for both. But Serious Web in itself is, you just start it and it works, and you don't have to integrate it into another IDE. You could if you want to, but we want to make sure it's usable even without, and so that you can deploy your graphical tool or modeling tool for users which would, well, freak out looking at a menu with hundreds of options and actions that like you can get in an IDE. So
nice. We already started, but talk a little more about technologies and products you are currently working on. So you name Serious Web. We previously talked about Axeleo. Maybe can we talk about Capella and his role in for the company in your product line, let's say?
sure. So Capella has quite a bit of history itself. At the beginning of OBO, we worked with Thales in order to help them tool their methodology, that system engineering methodology, which is called Arcadia. Well, when they came to us asking for graphical modelers, and we had the experience of GMF at the time, and we were like, yeah, it's doable, but you need like, seems like you need like dozens of different diagramming, and it's going to be huge, I mean, as a cost, and it's going to be a pain to maintain and so on. And that's why we developed Serious with them, in order to be able to create such graphical modeling area and tooling quicker and to maintain in the long time. And Thales on his side was working on using Serious in order to build what is now Capella. A few years later, Thales decided to make it open source and to provide such a tool which had 10 years of experience of Thales embedded in it through the methodology, through all the accelerators in the tools and so on, and to make it open source, and it became Capella. And now we are seeing more and more people adopting it every day, and we are currently running the Capella days, and we are seeing a significant growth in adoption. For OBO, so we are still working on the underlying technology, which is Serious, also working in providing add-ons to either Serious or Capella. We have an add-on which brings you the ability to collaborate in live on your system engineering model in Capella with no locking, diffing, and something very easy. Just think about Google Doc, but for models. And we also build a product which is called SMW, System Modeling Workbench with Siemens, which actually integrates Capella with Siemens Teamcenter PLM, and so that system engineers can integrate all the architecture definition into the complete life cycle of a project and of a product. And while we are kind of extending this strategy of providing add-ons with other things coming up, we recently published a new product which is called which is part of the cloud offering, and which is called Publication for Capella, which allows you to use your Capella model, publish it on a server, and it's going to be accessible for anybody and accessible through OSLC APIs, so that you can connect it with an ALM like Polarion or another ALM which is able to speak OSLC.
You were saying that this collaboration with Thales was going on for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And you also name a partnership with Siemens. So I wanted to ask if having these long-going projects was important to give you the time to do investments and improve your technology over time, because maybe it gives you more visibility.
Well, yeah, I would say I think such long project or such project which gets renewed year after year is very important, because we do build technologies and we do build it to last. And in order to do that, we need some source of income and also some source of input for a long time. And if you look at Obio's top customers, it's only multi-year relationships. It starts with a proof of concept, and then if the proof of concept gets validated, then the company starts a real investment program to create a tool and deploy it and maybe commercialize it and so on. And then it can only be a multi-year relationship, because of course it takes time to develop, it takes time to deploy it, to get the result and to adapt and so on. This makes us pretty strong, especially in a time like crisis we're living here. Way of working with such customers just gets repeated, and they need it, and we have this strong relationship year over year. And then I can, me myself as a CEO, well, build on it and maybe take some risk here and there, because I have this activity which is pretty stable.
And we name very large clients because I think they give you the possibility to prove your technology at a large scale and bring their own challenges. But I was wondering, do you also work with small clients, or are your typical clients very large corporation or public administration?
Well, the typical client is pretty large, yes. And we also work with smaller clients, but mostly on the offers which are, off the shelf. So products which are ready to use and are off the shelf. Here we work with smaller organizations or intermediate organizations which are acquiring the tool and deploying it and using it as is, or with small modifications and so on. But all the activity which is about building a tool for the long term and so on, almost only with large clients, or with some other organization which tool vendor which want to build his own tool and commercialize it and so on. But as we do provide the technology as open source, such independent software vendor, they do it on their own and ask us only for some expertise or help and so on. But they're able to develop the tool on their own and develop the expertise up to a point, and they need us when it gets trickier.
So probably many smaller clients are just buying the tool, use them on their own, being very successful, and maybe you never hear about them or learn about how they're using it.
Yeah, well, that's part of the model, yes. But I hope they will get very successful. I actually, with more than 100 different tools, which is displayed on the Serious gallery, tools built on top of Serious. Most of them, Obio did not get any revenue, but that's the whole strategy of putting it open source. And we do have an add-on which you can add to Serious to provide this Google Doc-like collaborative capabilities. So in some way, a successful tool built on Serious can provide us revenues also.
Or maybe someone at a smaller company start using it, see the benefits, and when they move to a larger company, they can also advocate. And maybe we talk at the beginning about code generation. When we talk about Axeleo. I was wondering if you also have considered reverse engineering. So if it happens that you start working with companies that have already their solution, and in a way you need to build a model from what they already have.
Yeah, well, at the beginning of OBO, that was the business model, which was really focused on this. We had the ability to accelerate developments, and this part was open source in order to be known and so on. And we had the ability to reverse engineer any language into EMF models. And with a technology which is really efficient, a bit, think about Sirius, the very fast turnaround and instant feedback, but for parsing. So you would just take a file, a text, and you will just mark, hey, this is the keyword for a class and so on. And you would build the eCore model while parsing files, and then launch it on the source code and get a model. Thanks to this unification power of models and technologies and so on, then you could then transform it using ATL, or you could generate code into another technology with Axelio. And at the beginning, that was the commercial part of OBO. So there was the acceleration of development, which was the open source part, and the reverse engineering, which was the commercial part. We did change at some point because it was very, very hard to get project to build such tools, even if we were quite efficient in building a tool to reverse engineer and to then generate. Mostly because I would say in France, there were like maybe 4 or 5 projects each year of the right size in order to justify to create a tool to get the to be more efficient. In 2008, there were none, right? So there's been the crisis happening, and then the big corporation were like, well, that's legacy, but we're not going to migrate the legacy into something new. We are going to split things and try to replace things over time and so on. So that's when we stopped this activity. But from a technical point of view, it was pretty fun and pretty interesting, because then we would have to pass millions of lines of code and put it into an EMF model, which of course, well, EMF was not really designed for handling such a huge amount of data at first. So we had to improve on it and then generate code and so on. So from a technical point of view, it was challenging. But now the technology is around here, and it's part of the history of OBO, but it's right there. It's still run because Eclipse is so able to move forward while keeping compatibility. And looking at the machine we have now, I think it's most likely really fast. So that could be fun to try it on something else.
Yeah, but I think this is very interesting because, well, from a technical point of view, I would find that very interesting. I work myself with language migration and reverse engineering, so I think it's will be an amazing technology to have. But it's interesting that you have a vision that combine technology point of view, but also the business point of view. So, and maybe, you have to make a business choice, and something that is technically excellent, maybe is not the best to spend energies on to grow the company. So.
Yeah. And the whole premise of the technology was, let's make it so easy to build a parser that for each project, you're going to build a new one. Even if you already have, there's a COBOL parser, that it's a nonsense to say there is a COBOL parser, because there are hundreds of different COBOLs, and each project I would say, its own COBOLs. And so the technology itself was making it easy to create your own parser. Most of the customers, they were kind of wanting also something which is, you support COBOL, so that's good, we're good, we just buy it. And the technology was not meant to be sold this way. It was more like, let's build the parser for your own legacy code. And if we need more, we'll build another parser, even if it's also COBOL. But then you get to decide what you really want to extract. But I would say the market was not really ready for that.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, because also what I see with many companies, that have legacy code and have been successful is that they tend to use the language in a specific way. They tend to use certain patterns to write code in a certain way. So if you have something specific, you can take advantage of that.
Yeah.
But I understand that this is a model that is less scalable because, as you said, you need to adapt to every single client. So maybe it's a good model for a consultancy company, small consultancy company, less good for a company that want to grow to the tens of employees.
Yeah, at that time, it was also the time where all the activities on domain-specific modeling and graphical modeling was growing. And so we had this growth on one hand, and we had this other business, which was, well, not giving us what we were expecting. So you need to make some choice. And even if there's maybe a model which would work, well, you go to the model which is now growing and which is going to work better. So.
Okay, we have more or less 10 minutes, and I want to be sure that we also have some time to discuss about the future and what you see that is interesting for the future. So I would like to start with this very open question. So what are the most interesting direction that you see for modeling? What are something that excite you or you think will be important in the future?
What excites me is that it's gonna be more than ever possible for anybody to create his own tool, and that's what we are trying to achieve with Serious Web, to create it and to get value out of it because it's going to be used outside. And also, what is really interesting is that this whole idea of having something on the web but connected to other data source and so on. We're not trying to be the center of the ecosystem here. We are trying to integrate with PLMs, with ALMs, and so on. If you look in the futures, you'll get tools which have awesome user experience, which are getting data from all the other systems in order to support engineering activities, right? You're going to be able to use statistics and AI and so on in order to help you make decisions while designing your architecture or your system or whatever. And that's pretty exciting, and I really see the future there.
This that you said made me think of an interview that I read, which Jeff Bezos was saying, it was possible for me to build Amazon because there was a lot of infrastructure that I could use. There was, I don't know, companies offering hosting so I could have the website, companies doing delivery so I could do the delivery. And in a way, by building this technology to permit to build tools, you also permit authors to follow their own ideas and to create technology. So you enable them, and I think that's it's very powerful.
Yeah, and now they're going to be able to create the tool, deploy it, be in contact with users directly through chats or support or whatever, see how it goes, help them. So it's even just that, without even looking at all the longer term of connecting with data from other sources, and even just that, it's pretty exciting, and it's going to happen in the next few years. We are trying to accelerate that by putting what we built in the last few years on the web as open source with Serious Web, and we'll see how the community use it. And I'm pretty sure I'd be surprised. And I always like to be surprised by such things.
And about the future, your company is a strategic member of Eclipse. So I would like to ask you, what future do you see for Eclipse and for EMF?
Well, there's lots of interesting things happening in the Eclipse ecosystem. So we have quite a few vendors, companies working on cloud-based tools and so on, which are gathering in Eclipse because it's such a great place to collaborate. The rules are clear, the IP management is clear, and everybody can collaborate on that, on technologies and yet compete on the market. And that's pretty useful for companies. And also the Eclipse Foundation is moving and opening a branch in Europe. So it's pretty exciting for a European company because it means we'll get more visibility, and it's going to be easier to be part of this consortium in Europe. It's currently being noticed by Europeans, organizations, and so on. So it means more members means more areas we could collaborate on the technologies through Eclipse.
Instead, more specifically about OBO, what are the future plans that you see? What are the markets that you find more interesting? We discussed the fact that you recently opened the office in Vancouver, so obviously you're growing internationally, but is there any other direction or anything else that you can share about the plans?
Well, in terms of market, there's the whole activity around MBSC is pretty interesting because it's still a market which is structuring itself. So it's not a blank area, but an area where lots of system engineers are discovering and trying to adopt tools and so on. So if you look at how people adopted system, which is known but not that great. If you look at the system engineers, you have maybe 1 on 10 which did adapt system, and with something like Capella, it can grow up to the 9 others because the tool is so much easier to use and more focused on the actual system engineers' needs. There's lots of potential of growth here, and these markets is important in North America, in Europe, and now more and more also in South America and in Asia. And we see lots of uptick and acceleration in Asia lately in adopting model-based system engineering. And there's a whole ecosystem which is kind of being built right now around this. So it's pretty exciting also from a market point of view, yeah.
Okay, so the first 14 years of the company were exciting. Probably also the next 14 years will be plenty of new things and new exciting things.
Yeah, let's just, moving forward.
Well, good, like the name suggests. Okay, so we are in the final minutes. So I wanted to ask if there is anything that you wanted to discuss that I didn't ask or didn't come up in the conversation.
It's all right.
Okay.
I don't see any clear missing point.
I hope that we manage at least to give an introduction. Then, of course, every one of these topics will deserve a 1 hour discussion. Like I think we could speak about Serious Web for 1 hour, right?
Yeah, let's make it a monthly interview, right?
That would be nice. And I wanted also to ask where people can find more about OBO and what you suggest they should start looking into.
To know about the company?
About the company and also your technology. If I don't know, some practitioner, will you suggest them to start looking at Serious Web, or there are tutorials or material on your website?
Well, right now, if you want to discover OBO, there's the OBO website. But right now, if you want to use the technology, Serious Web is not going to be the easiest one to start with because we're releasing it next week. So it's gonna be published by then. But to give a good idea of what can be done, looking at Serious and the gallery and all the tools that have been built is pretty useful. And if you want to look at a very good example of something which has been built on top of Serious, then Capella is there, and it's available for free. It's open source, and it's a complete tooling environment which rely on Serious and EMF and so on for anybody to try and see. So that's something you could envision. And if you want to envision what's going to be with Serious Web, just think about such an area, but completely revamped and with a different user experience and easier to adapt. but yeah, the OBO and Sirius website would be the places to go and to discover these technologies. And we are going to, well, improve also on all the other technologies. And there's a new Axelio coming up.
Nice.
And well, as I said, we are in for the long game, and Axelio has been updated, and now there's a new engine which is going to be presented at EclipseCon next week. Also, lots of good stuff are coming up.
Good, good. And we will share a few links in the transcript. But we have now taken over 1 hour of your time, so I would like to thank you very much for this interview, because we touch a lot of points that were very interesting, and I think your story is inspiring both from a technical and from a business point of view. So thank you for sharing it.
Thank you, Federico. It was a pleasure for me, and it was really nice to chat with you. Really, thank you again.
Thank you. So maybe one day we will have another one. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.